I brought a little, instead of coffee talk, I brought a little happy hour since we're later in the day. Just a small little bottle that I had saved for everybody. So Finn, I'll start with you. I'll give you a little pour here.
Oh, that's perfect. Thank you.
You're
I
so
got
welcome.
mine. Appreciate that.
You're so welcome.
That's very kind of you. Say, John, we got great news today. We have Chip and Kelly, both from LDA, on.
Wow, that's pretty exciting. And we saw Kelly. Chip, you with us?
I am. Welcome from California, and actually I'm in Las Vegas today, but very nice to see everybody out there.
If you're in Las Vegas, obviously that's going to be hard hit with all the hospitality issues and the casino shut down with the virus. So what are you doing in Vegas?
Well, there's no doubt that I think the two hardest hit cities or states are Hawaii and Nevada as far as number one business is tourism. So there definitely is a lot going on and a lot has stopped. And that may sound really odd, but we have a couple of projects that the clients are looking forward to the end of this. So what they're really looking at is they're saying our occupancy rates are way down. So let's get these projects jammed through very, very quickly. So when the people start coming back, we don't have the disruption of any construction going on at that point. Now, having said that, there's no doubt that it's a ghost town here. All the casinos are closed down. They're experimenting. I was in one of them and they're basically furniture's all cleared out. They're disinfecting everything. They're doing mock-ups to say, for example, how can you have 3 people playing blackjack at a table to keep the social distancing? So they're looking at a lot of different ways to not only keep construction going, but also to prepare, whether it's a slow opening or a big opening. Talking to a lot of contractors, everybody says, and this is smaller contractors, they're very busy for the next month or two. They just don't know what's after that. So in other words, everybody's finishing up the current jobs. Will there be future projects after that? We all hope so.
You know, is there, you're saying that they're looking at different mock-ups for blackjack and things like that. Has there anything, is it just still mock-ups or anything they're thinking that's going to work? Because I'm really interested to see how Vegas, where every movie with Vegas, there's 50 people elbow to elbow around a craps table yelling and going crazy, and how that's part of the, I guess, the aura of Vegas. How is that going to change? Is there anything they're saying and hinting at?
Well, I think the wild part about Las Vegas in particular is I see this pent up demand that everybody's kind of tired of this social distancing. And I'm not going to get political and say if it's right or wrong, but they're busting at the seams. And the weekend crowd for Las Vegas is pretty much California driven. And so what I see is all these people that want to go to the beaches on the weekend or whatever, they have no problem, I think, and it's a younger demographics. I think they're all going to jump in their car and as soon as it's open, flood Las Vegas. Now, what really hurts them is the midweek convention business, because obviously all the conventions are shut down. The problem that we have is the workers, and especially the hospitality union here. We're all very, very concerned about the dealers, the restaurant servers, those types of people. So how can we have people that want to have fun, but not infect or potentially harm other people? So that's what I don't know what will happen between how much gets offered versus how much will be there. So they might open up the pools, they might open up the casinos, but I don't know, maybe every third slot machine is open, but I don't see the theater shows where you pack, 2,000 people in a very small space. I don't see those opening up originally, but I don't have a crystal ball, but we hope that it can be done safely for everyone.
Yeah, that's other things. Like I know in Vegas, a big thing is the day pool parties where they have DJs and it's shoulder to shoulder in the pools there too. And that's, everyone was already worried about how safe it was. Now with the virus being there, I think it's even a whole other thing. And yeah, the shows too, a lot of big money makers.
I think Vegas is certainly a place where you can do stuff outdoors. And you're talking about the pool parties being too dense, but outdoors is at least a slightly better for this kind of virus activities. So are we going to see activities moving outdoors in Vegas? Are we going to see them moving outdoors in California?
In Vegas, it's the reason the pool parties work is because it's 120 degrees and you got to be near a pool. But I think anything else, outdoor activities might be out of the question. What do you think there, Chip?
I think it's all alcohol based personally. But also look at the demographics. And once again, we're finding out that COVID basically can affect younger people too. You know, the 20s to the 40s type, they are definitely at risk, but they're not the highest risk. So, but you have to think about who are the bartenders, who are the people that are serving all of these people. But I think that definitely, we know that airflow and ventilation definitely helps this situation. It diffuses things. So outdoor venues are okay. But if you've ever been here on a weekend, just the sidewalk on the strip is packed, especially on a Friday or a Saturday night. And it's very hard. You know, I know that it was in the paper today, the Venetian was going to have, you know, at check-in, 6-foot intervals already marked out for everybody. That's fine. But doing that safety measure, and then you put people, you know, 2 inches apart when they're trying to cross the street or something like that. You know, we just all have to be careful. And the real question is, will the guests, for example, wear their masks? You know, a simple thing like this could allow everything to open up very safely for everyone. And that would not only help the workers, but also the guests too. So maybe it's style. So I patented something how I can drink through one of these masks so you can come to Vegas and still have fun. But I haven't prototyped it yet.
So Chip, I know you were saying that there's definitely a potential for the weekend crowds and things like that. But what about what do you think? Have you heard anything about during the week with all the conventions and things that are hitting Vegas? Anything on that and how they're going to approach that?
As far as conventions right now, everything I understand is everything is closed down, shut down. And I don't know when they have a potential reopening or introduction, because there's 2 things. It's a lot of cost, and a promoter wants to make sure that if they put on a convention, that people will still come to it. So, you know, if it's Comic-Con, sure, everybody's going to show up, right? You can wear a Darth Vader mask and probably get away with it and things. But if it's, you know, the Consumer Electronics Show, you know, that drives Las Vegas, but it's just not Las Vegas. It's smaller, I'm going to call it convention style hotels.
Yeah, I think Chip brings up a good point, and that affects some of our friends in this industry as well. That doesn't just, you know, a lot of our friends don't just do architectural lighting, they do event and attraction lighting. And so all of that has come to a complete stop. But yeah, one of my really close friends owns one of the biggest equipment rental, and they design all these major shows for all the different you know, Food Network and Bravo and all these big shows that happen every year in Vegas. So it's a complete standstill. But they've actually, I think a lot of people are using the word adaptability, and that's going to be key for everybody's business. They've actually come up with some new branding to create, instead of creating a booth right now for a show, they're creating, you know, individual check-in styles, whether it's for a hotel or for a retail store. So they're almost rebranding themselves to be temporary kiosks, or however far into the future this all has to happen.
So Kelly, I was going to ask you, you guys do a lot of international work. Are you also seeing what's happening in terms of how casinos, hospitality, or other industries are responding overseas?
Yes, definitely. I think luckily a lot of our international work, mostly because it's pretty large scale, is still continuing. We haven't seen a lot of slowdown on that, but as far as how the whole world is adapting to this, so whether it's a project here locally or if it's something international, it's been really interesting to see how the programming is starting to shift a bit. There's talk of nobody knows what's going to happen with spas and a lot of these high-end hotels that we're doing. So that's kind of a big question mark right now. And just kind of how the treatment and the cleaning and all these things has to happen, and this whole touchless idea that everybody wants to incorporate for the hotels. Temporary check-in desks, whether it's an existing hotel or a new hotel that we're designing, those areas are being completely reprogrammed and sometimes even abandoned if it's a 3-meal restaurant. Obviously, the whole idea of buffets going away, and how do they treat the actual restaurant and F&B aspect of all these hospitality projects. It's been pretty interesting. And I think you guys brought up fitness before too, or outdoor activities. There's one project we're working on. They're talking about actually moving. It's a good environment for it, and it has the atmosphere to support it. But the whole fitness program is actually moving outdoors now. So it's been a pretty interesting, just the past several weeks, to see that roller coaster ride of how those things are starting to shift pretty quickly.
Have you guys, in all your in food prep areas and restaurants that you're dealing with, has anyone even broached the subject of integrating UVC into the lighting design to sterilize after customers are gone?
Right. I would probably say a lot of people are now interested in the use of lighting to, I'm going to say, facilitate cleansing, and it depends whether you want to look at UVA, UVB, UVC, all different techniques. There's not, for example, any conclusive studies on which one will be the best for COVID. So it's actually very, very different. And actually today, the IES had a 4-hour webinar on it that I sat in this morning. It was actually excellent, covering a lot of those topics. The big problem that we have is front of house spaces. Do we do these, I'm going to call it UVC lights that turn on after hours when people aren't in the space? And we're also lucky enough to sit on a lot of California-based code. And there's a lot of concerns because everything we're working on right now is to turn the lights off, use occupancy sensors when no people are in spaces to get rid of that electric load. And a lot of these disinfectants type of lighting scenarios use UVC, which need to turn on when no people are in the spaces. The other option that we have is to do what we would call the upper cavity, in other words, indirect lighting, and use good air movement. So you have indirect lights that are shooting up that will kill the bacteria or the potential viruses. But we got to make sure that that's shielded. And unfortunately, a lot of those are very ugly looking. They look like bug zappers, you know? So when you have a large scale casino, you have a high-end restaurant, nobody's going to want to see those elements integrated. So I think people are talking about it. People are looking at blending those technologies with visible type of light. But you have to remember, it's direct. So in other words, if you have a room with a bunch of downlights, that's great at maybe sterilizing somewhat the air and the countertops, but your trash can underneath your desk at work, because it doesn't get the direct exposure, won't solve any problems. So we don't have a one silver bullet that's going to solve all of those things. But a direct answer to your question is people are discussing it, but they don't know that it will work. So I think they're going to be looking at lighting. They're going to be looking at the mechanical systems because that way they could do a larger volumes of spaces, and they basically will be doing it at the air handling units. So they're looking at everything, and especially Vegas, where they do a lot of air changes anyway. It's a little bit easier to do that. It's the smaller individual restaurants that become very, very problematic. And how do we build it into good architecture? And I'd like to finish it by saying that a lot of it comes down to air changes and natural ventilation too. And this comes back to one of our core principles. Instead of using lighting to recreate circadian rhythms and all these other things, let's get architects to build better buildings and put people close to windows. And here's a concept: let's open the windows, take advantage of the weather whenever we can, because they're finding out that that really helps out with all types of viruses. And this is tuberculosis. This is all the ones that continually plague, you know, not only the US, but around the world.
That's really interesting stuff right there. And I think what you hit on, which really stuck with me, is that I think before, you know, we've been doing these coffee talk series to try and really just get a feel of what's going on, you know, and how different things impact the industry. And what you were saying, you really hit it, because before the virus, I think it was unquestionably, as you had said, we're looking at ways to turn the lights off. And this could be almost a quick 180 in certain ways, where the lights have to turn back on, because this is something that, you know, could be really impacting a lot of the way we design moving forward.
Yeah, I think the solution personally is a hybrid approach, and I should probably patent this, but it's a combination of a sterilizing UV component and a Roomba. In other words, a robot. So the idea is that if we could actually have, and there are technologies that you can push into, for example, a hotel, could be a hotel, but more importantly, like a hospital room. But if these things could actually move throughout the space so that when everybody goes home at nighttime in an office space, this thing can program itself, come around. That way, we are now getting the proper exposure, not only on the work surfaces, the walls, but it can now move around and get things under desks and things. And I think the combination of a self-driving, a self-learning mobile system makes a lot more sense to me than trying to turn every light fixture into a sterilizer.
I was talking to somebody yesterday about UVC applications to sterilize, and they're using it in combination with hydrogen peroxide mist or another type of mist, because then the UVC reflects off of the particles and is able to get into crevices and areas that otherwise couldn't be reached. So I don't know, maybe we'll go the other direction and get sterilizing where things look like raves in these buildings.
Yeah, maybe you need a combination of drones and Roombas to get all these things tackled. You get it all from above and below.